Welcome to this week's Who the Folk podcast. I'm Lonnie Goldsmith, the editor of TC Jewfolk. This week I sit down with Lucy Marshall, formerly a social work intern at Shir Tikvah and the new head of the Rising Tide Open Waters Mikveh Network. We talk about her part in the sanctuary work at Shir Tikvah that you can read about now on TC Jewfolk, her new role at a national organization, and how her work aligns with her Judaism on this week's Who the Folk podcast. Lucy Marshall, welcome to the Who the Folk podcast. Thank you for joining me.
Thanks for having me.
So I wanted to have you on because we had just, you were part of a story that just launched on TC Jewfolk this morning, Sunday morning, if you are listening to this, right when it comes out, about a family that has been living in sanctuary at Shir Tikvah congregation in Minneapolis. They've been living there, had been living there for 37 months. And then I got an email saying the new head of the Open Waters Rising Tide Mikveh Network lives in Minneapolis, and her name is Lucy Marshall. And I said, hey, that's funny. I was already talking to her. So we'll cover both things, certainly. But obviously I want to start with sort of to me, the bigger one was with Diego, Rebecca, and their family living in Shir Tikvah. How did you, I guess, first get connected with Shir Tikvah and then ultimately end up working so closely with the family to make sure that they were taken care of?
Thank you. Yeah, so before moving to the Twin Cities in 2019, I was living in Madison, Wisconsin, and I was doing Jewish youth engagement work there. And part of my job was attending like nifty youth group programming, and I got to connect with Jewish youth professionals and teens from Minnesota, including Forrest Yesnes, who is director of like youth engagement at Shir Tikvah. And I heard about Shir Tikvah, thought it sounded really rad. So when I moved here, I hit up Forrest and was like, can I teach at Shir Tikvah? How do I get connected with your congregation and the awesome young people there? So I worked as a teacher for the past 2 years at Shir Tikvah. And also, when I first moved here, I started a social work program at the University of Minnesota. And both years in that program, students have internships. And luckily, Shir Tikvah opened their first ever social work internship my second year in the program. And I connected with Rabbi Ariel Lakach Rosenberg about it, heard about the opportunity, and it was so dreamy. And I pursued it, and that's how I moved into one of my roles as an intern this past year, starting from last September, was supporting the Sanctuary Immigrant Justice Project at Shir Tikvah, which included supporting Rebecca and Diego's family.
So this is your second master's degree that you just finished. Your signature line in your email is chock full of like you've done a lot of stuff in the Jewish world and without. You have an MA in Jewish education also.
I'm pursuing that right now.
I'm sorry. You're okay. Pursuing.
I'm in that in the moment. Yeah. At the Jewish Theological Seminary. So that'll be still have another year or so of that.
So you were pursuing that at the same time you were pursuing your MSW and you were doing it at two different schools.
Yes.
Is that a normal thing? Because that just feels a lot to do both at one time.
Well, it's funny because my undergrad, I did the joint program between the Jewish Theological Seminary and Columbia. So I did two undergrad programs at the same time, but that's like meant to be.
Right.
And so I think I just I started social work school and I felt like I knew that I wanted to be doing like justice and community engagement work in Jewish communities. And I really felt like something was missing in my social work education without that like forward Jewish piece in my learning. And so the JTS master's program I'm doing now is part-time online, like was online even before COVID, meant for folks who are working full-time. So instead of working full-time, I was a student full-time in addition to the master's program at JTS. So okay. I kind of made my own, DIY'd my own dual degree program for my master's. Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I got myself totally sidetracked.
Okay.
This happens often. So you're doing the work supporting Diego and Rebecca and the family. At what point were you sort of brought in to the secret if you will, of what was going on? Because I know that it was not a commonly known fact that the family was living there.
Okay, so you mean when did I first hear about that the family
Yes.
was in
Was that
sanctuary?
something that they told you about, like in the interview process, that this was going to be part of what you were doing,
Hmm.
or was it
Hmm.
after you had sort of gotten your feet wet a little bit?
Yeah, so I'm pretty sure it might have been during the interview process that I heard about it when Rabbi Ariel was kind of laying out some of the projects I might be involved in. But I had been part of the Shir Tikvah community for the year before as a
Mm,
teacher and didn't know about the sanctuary work of the congregation. So it was like I had been, I was a new member of Shir Tikvah community, but I wasn't aware that they were hosting a family until I, started the journey as an intern, basically.
which is sort of fascinating because, like, the classrooms downstairs is just down the hall from where they were sleeping
Yeah.
and living, and doing their living their life was just down the hall from there.
Yeah, and I'm sure that, I don't, I was kind of in a unique situation because at the time, my first year teaching, Shir Tikva was also using like the community center across the street for classrooms because they're just bursting at the seams. So
Right.
I didn't even teach in the Shir Tikva building that year.
Oh,
That was in
okay.
person. So that probably contributed also. But I
Sure.
know that there are still some congregants who are first hearing about the sanctuary program from the announcement that they've, thank God, left sanctuary. And part of that is, of course, like with the safety, security of the family in mind. And many Shir Tikva members have been volunteers and coordinators and like extremely involved in the project. So it's kind of a big range.
And I got to chat with some of them and meet them
Mm-hmm.
and sort of see the volunteerism in action at the send off
Nice.
that Rabbi Latz had invited me to for the family moving out last week, and it was very moving watching the gratitude of not just the people that were the family that was leaving sanctuary, but also of the Shir Tikva community for having the opportunity.
Mm-hmm.
It was really kind of lovely.
Yeah. I mean, it's really a meaningful project and program. And because it has been so long and because of the nature of living in sanctuary, really stripping away folks' ability to live in autonomy and, needing to be relying on others for support, like it creates grounds for really transformative relationships. Like folks, while the family is leaving sanctuary, like the relationships between many of the volunteers in the family are not like just all of a sudden ending, right? Like there's going to be long lasting relationships from this experience. And I think, it impacts folks as volunteers as well as supporting the family.
How did it impact you as somebody who, as an intern, so not like
Hmm.
fully staffed, but
Yeah.
somebody who's very intimately involved with the family and the program? How's the experience impacted you, and they're leaving sanctuary to their own place now? How has that
Mm.
process been for you?
Yeah. I mean, I think this was an amazing opportunity for me to witness and be a part of like what Jewish values and action really look and feel like. Shir Tikva is a synagogue and a community that really, you know, its identity is around pursuing justice and repairing the world. And it was special to be, part of such a meaningful project to really live that out. And I think I could see something that brought me to social work is this dynamic between needing to meet the needs of individuals that are really specific and unique while also having an eye toward like these greater conditions that lead to the need to have services and support in the first place. So I could see the direct impact of policy, of elected officials, of culture, like around immigrant justice issues, directly impacting, a beautiful, courageous family of seven who are trying to meet the needs of their children and support their learning and make sure they have food and laundry, and so I could see the way that like policy and culture are animating the daily intimate lives of this family, which especially like as a white person and a person who like comes from a family with wealth and like owned a house and all of these other privileges and advantages, like so much of that intimate connection can be ignored. So it was definitely an intimate and meaningful learning experience for me. And I learned a lot from the family themselves and following, their leadership and wisdom too.
You really, I got the opportunity. You and I met when I first got to sit down. It was with you and Rabbi Latz with our translator, um, with Diego and Rebecca, and then I had the opportunity to go back to take some pictures,
Mm-hmm.
and the interest that, I mean, the two older kids had in
Mm-hmm.
translating for me, and like talking to me about, um just, show me, they gladly showed me around their living space,
Mm-hmm.
and like they really took a lot of pride in where they were staying, and I think there some might take, might look for pity or be ashamed
Mm-hmm.
of it, but that's not what was happening there with them.
Yeah, that's great to hear. I mean, I think the energy that the family has brought, especially around, supporting their own needs and the process toward freedom and liberation is like, they've been really the leaders of that process. And, you know, so much of this is driven their like hope and desire for freedom and liberation, and their whole reason for coming to the US in the first place is around the, dignity and safety and happiness of their children. So the kids are really excited to be in their own home and to have access to the things that they so much deserve. So I'm yeah, I mean, the definitely the environment was one of like compassion and caring, and we did everything we could to ensure they were living with dignity even during sanctuary. And also like having a lack of freedom in and of itself is like, such a barrier. So
Yeah.
yeah.
But and that's the thing. That lack of freedom, it could be very dispiriting, and maybe it
Mhm.
was in darker moments. But
Mhm.
at least in getting to talk to them, they never looked at it as a glass half empty situation.
Mhm. Yeah, I mean, I like you said, I'm sure that there were ups and downs. Like it's hard to be optimistic only about that situation, and especially since the election, since Biden came into office, like which is around when I joined the project. Like there was like a real shift around, freedom is possible, liberation is possible, having a lot of energy both from the kids and Rebecca and Diego themselves about like, here's the life that they can create. So I think, it creates a lot more space for that optimism when there's a reason for hope and change.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right, so switching gears, you're still, you have you're halfway through your JTS program,
Yeah.
and your internship, I suppose, is now done
Yep. I'm
because.
just like finalizing a couple more things to support this transition off of sanctuary work.
Mhm.
Just a few hours a week supporting that, but yeah, on my way out of that role. Hmm.
And your way into the Rising Tide Open Waters Mikvah Network.
Yeah.
How did you get connected with that organization, and how do you see your role there working and evolving as the group grows?
Thanks. Yeah, so I first heard about Maim Chaim, which is the parent kind of
Mhm.
organization. I first heard about them when I was looking for a mikveh to go to before my wedding.
Ah, okay.
And so I reached out and I was like, hey, are there any mikveh that are similar in values as Maim Chaim? Because Maim Chaim's um, mission and vision is around making mikvah accessible and inclusive to Jews of all abilities, denominations, genders, sexual orientation, ages, and I really aligned with those values. And at the time, I was living in Madison, so they connected me with a synagogue there that has a mikvah that is a member of the Rising Tide Open Waters Mikvah Network. And part of the resources of Rising Tide and Mayim Chaim is creating like innovative ritual based on this like ancient tradition and ensuring that every Jew has access to a meaningful, transformative spiritual experience that the mikvah can be for any life transitions that are important to them. And so it was really supportive to me as like someone about to get married, and really an impactful experience for me as my first ever mikvah. And so when I saw the opportunity when I was looking for jobs upon graduating the University of Minnesota, like I was so thrilled for this opportunity. The Rising Tide Open Waters Mikveh Network is a global network that supports mikvaot around the country and the world, and folks who want to create new community mikvaot who have these open and progressive values around inclusivity and accessibility. And yeah, it's like a role that centers relationship building and belonging and the power of ritual to heal the world. So I'm super honored and thrilled to get started.
You mentioned communities that are wanting to add it. I spoke with Cantor Rachel Stock Spilker at
Mm-hmm.
Mount Zion. Boy, a year. I mean, it was pre-pandemic, so maybe a couple years ago at this point. But Minnesota is one of those communities
Mm-hmm.
that's looking to expand and have a community mikvah that fits under the ethos
Yes.
of this network. So I know that the Cantor is very involved in that, and I'm hoping to sort of follow how that progresses now.
Yeah, I'm really thrilled about the project. I just had the opportunity to connect with Cantor Stock Spilker and hear more about all of the work that she and others have put in. An advisory committee is launching, like things are happening and moving. And it's a great time if folks are listening to this and are jazzed up about contributing and being part of this really community wide project to build an open and inclusive mikvah in our community. Like it's really a gift to have this chance. I'm excited as a Rising Tide director to be able to, offer structural support, resources, connections, and relationships to my own community in like building this as a lab. And also, like, I'm excited that to put like Minnesota on the map as really like a center of innovative Jewish life and community. I'm really proud to be part of that and to be supporting Cantor Stock Spilker and others who are leading this up locally.
So between this new job that you're going to be starting, have you started it?
Yes.
Suppose I should ask. Oh, you
Yeah.
have.
It's
Okay.
my second week.
Oh, okay, excellent. So between this job that you are just starting in and the internship that you are transitioning out of, how do you see those two? I mean, they're obviously very different
Mhm.
types of jobs, but how do you see each of them fitting to your Jewish values and how
Mhm.
you and your family live Jewishly?
Yeah, thank you. Something that I really learned from my time at Shir Tikvah as an intern, as someone working in the Sanctuary Project and others, is the power of being part of like a community that shares ritual and that is dedicated to belonging, and creating belonging through like the wisdom of our traditions, looking back and also looking forward into like how do we think creatively about the wisdom that's passed on through generations and make it meaningful to our lives and our world that we're trying to repair. And I that learning and being part of that work at Shir Tikvah definitely inspired me to know that community mikvaot and supporting mikvah as this opportunity for like grounding a Jewish community is a source of repairing the world, is a source of justice making and doing together. And so yeah, I think I'm really thrilled to be able to be looking at a lens in how do we make stronger, more inclusive, and like diverse Jewish communities, and doing that through ritual, specifically mikvah. So that's
Mhm.
kind of the arc that I think connects some of those experiences for me.
Well, it's very exciting. I mean, it's great that you have this opportunity at a national sort of up and coming organization to be able to stay here where you
Oh
are,
yeah.
a job that lets you, not have to move, uproot
Mhm.
yourself and move, and to have this opportunity. It's great.
Thank you. Yeah, I'm really grateful. I was committed to staying in the Twin Cities, and, especially with COVID like happening pretty soon after I moved here, I'm just so grateful I can dig in my roots and like really plant myself here, and continue building relationships in the Twin Cities for sure.
It does sort of seem weird that you moved here right around that time
Yeah,
and you're here and we're still sort of in the tail end, hopefully the tail end of this,
I
but we're
hope so
still in it
too.
though.
Yeah, I know. It's
It's
long.
exhausting.
Definitely.
So is that hard? Like, obviously some of the work you did at Shir Tikvah, like we met face to face, but
Mhm.
obviously in some of the work you'd have to do in person. But going through the job hunting process and the interview process, like I imagine you haven't met face to face with any of your coworkers.
Yeah, not yet, which is a little wild. Yeah, it's kind of weird. I mean, in some ways, the remote work style has, I think there were a lot more national Jewish opportunities that they offered as remote positions out in the world because of or most people's experience working remotely the past year and a half. Like maybe other organizations wouldn't know that that's like doable and possible. So I think perhaps some opportunities were opened up to me in the job search process because of
Mhm.
that. But definitely, yeah, I mean, I think all of us have learned like how to make do in some way over Zoom, etc. But I'm very excited. I'll hopefully, if everything still okay, I'm planning to go to Boston and the end of this month to meet all my colleagues in person and get to see the Maim Chaim Mikvah and stuff and do an immersion there. So I'm
Oh,
looking forward to some like face to face time too.
that'll be amazing.
Yeah,
I'm sure that'll be a awesome and meaningful experience for you to get to do that.
I hope so. Yeah, thank you.
Well, Lucy, last couple questions, and we
Mhm.
will let you go. What is your favorite Jewish holiday?
Ooh, um, it's always a tie between Sukkot and Passover. But
Okay.
I will say Sukkot. I love, ever since I was younger, my family's always built a sukkah. And actually, both of my parents are architects. So they were like really pumped to build a sukkah. They're like structures, design, like they're into that. And so were we. And I grew up in Elgin, Illinois, like an hour west of Chicago,
Sure.
super small Jewish
Yep.
community. And the backyard of my family's house backed up to this big soccer field and park. So when we every year build the sukkah, it was like on display to a lot of people, being like, "What are you doing? What is that?" And we're like trying to explain this bizarre thing that we build a hut every year, and like we would sleep out in it and eat in it. And so it's just like funny, warm memories and of like celebrating fall and connecting with the rhythms of nature. And last year we built our first sukkah since moving here to Minnesota, and it was wonderful. So I'm really excited for that this fall.
And hopefully you picked up some tips of how to make it as structurally sound as the one you grew up with.
Yes, actually, this year, now that we don't have my parents' support, we got like a kit,
Okay.
those sukkah kits. So we made it pretty easy. My creativity came in with the decoration, so
There
that
you
was the
go.
part. Yeah.
That's awesome. And what is your favorite Jewish food?
Hmm. I love gefilte fish. That's my favorite Jewish food.
Really?
Yeah, I know that it's polarizing, but
Very.
my bubby just made the best gefilte fish. I grew up just absolutely loving it ever since I was little. And the other food that she got me hooked on was halva, the
Okay,
dessert.
sure.
So both of those things make me think of her, and we had a really special relationship. So I'll always have a craving for. I would eat gefilte fish any time of year.
Wow, you will not get a lot of people agreeing with you on
Yeah,
that. You know
I
that,
know.
right?
It's not a popular answer.
Not at all. Well, Lucy Marshall, thank you so much for your time. Mazel tov on the new job. Best of luck with it, and thank you for all your work with Rebecca and Diego and the family at Shir Tikvah. And if you haven't yet, please, everyone, go read their story on TC Jewfolk right now. It was a blast to write and get to meet everyone involved with it. And so I hope you enjoy it. But thank you, Lucy, for your time.
Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
The Who the Folk podcast is part of the Jewfolk Podcast Network, a product of Jewfolk Inc. Please subscribe, rate, and review the show wherever you get your podcasts. If you have suggestions for other podcast guests, please email them to me at editor@tcjewfolk.com. For our other shows, check out tcjewfolk.com/podcast.